I needed this. I needed something clear, focused, and straight to the point. The ASUS ProArt series is heavily focused on the creators, the content creators out there, prioritizing absolute stability, bandwidth over power figures. In short, it's not a screamer, but it is the loudest. I came up with that. Now, starting with the obvious. Our X870E-CREATOR is fundamentally good and sturdy, featuring 8 FSR 4 low-loss signal PCB layers, insulated and reinforced by 2 ounces copper plating. Just what all motherboard should have to start on the right foot in terms of cooling, stability, and lifespan. Nothing to re-say here. Now, the design is definitely a strong point, with a very sober yet sophisticated theme, which cleverly contrasts between shiny and matte. All of our cooling components are nicely sanded and give an unmistaken engineering feel. We have no useless or dated embedded RGB, but instead 3 RGB connectors here to give you the opportunity to take a large, shiny turd on this island of excellent and good taste. Please don't. More technically, our X870E-CREATOR is powered by AMD's very best, namely an AM5 CPU socket coupled to its flagship chipset. On one hand, our CPU socket does support a wide range of past and present Ryzen processors and delivers all of its bandwidth promises through 24 PCIe 5.0 lanes. The X870E chipset, on the other hand, will take care of all the slower PCIe standards as well as the latest connectivity features such as the Wi-Fi 7 and USB 4s. And I also do need to note that the chipset cooling plate is absolutely not only gorgeous, but sturdy, thick, and does an amazing job at keeping our Promo 21 chips as cool as they can be. Now, more crucially, VRM-wise, the X870E-CREATOR proposes a stability gold standard with a straightforward 2080 amps dedicated phases organized in a 16+2+2 configuration. Now, that is a conservative, yet premium 1300 amps worth of CPU juice, which, thanks to its more expensive dedicated phases configuration, is an absolute dream in terms of clock response. Cooling wise, the VRM segments are absolutely adequate. The main blocks features on one hand thick walls for plenty of heat storing, and on the other a large thick radiating plate for its release. And as far as the side block goes, it is extremely tall, dense, and is equally good at expelling heat than it harvests it. That is a complex thing to say. In addition, we do have a double thermal padded direct contact to offer a swift heat harvesting from both chokes and power stages. And thermal results are absolutely stunning, both when the CPU is configured as stock clock or within its AI boost configuration, which, to be fair, did not offer much of a boost. Nevertheless, in all configuration, our temps remain far from the 50 degrees Celsius limit, and far more impressive, both blocks reached saturation within the first minutes of the stress test and kept a rock stable surface temperature all along the 60-minute stress test, pointing at a heat exhausting faster than it is harvested. The focus here is stability, agility, and getting a long lifespan out of your processor as well as your motherboard. It is content creation peace of mind that ASUS is going after here. Now, I have no problem imagining this motherboard being coupled with an R9 processor, even a 9950X. And I understand that the 80 amps power stages seems a little bit modest, but the way it's been configured, the direct phases on one hand, several of them on the other, really gives that motherboard the ability, the possibility to interact with such powerful high core count processors. Now, just keep in mind that it doesn't matter how well balanced your VRM is if you don't keep that processor cool. And when we're talking about the content creating motherboard and R9 high core count processors, you'll need some heavy duty coolers, such as the one I'm using today, is the 360 Panorama from Trix, which kept my 12 core 24 threads R9 9900X below the 70 degrees Celsius during the entirety of my test. Just absolutely gorgeousness all together, and totally free advice. Now, memory-wise, our ProArt X870E-CREATORs supports the usual 256GB of DDR5 RAM organized in a dual-channel configuration for an unusual, modest 8,000 million transfers per second data swap. And I say modest because similarly priced motherboard can easily output 9,000 million transfer per second, if not more. But again, being a stability over performances motivated motherboard, I do understand the move. And to be fair, 8,000 million transfer per second is also very, very fast. Not all sticks can get there. And that's where my only critique comes here, because despite my best effort, I never managed to get this board posting anything higher than 7,400 million transfer per second. And I got about the best Hynix MDI equipped RAM money can buy. The Patriot Viper Extreme 5 sticks, which on an Extreme or an Apex will have no problem posting 9,000 million transfers per second or more. And I can only hear you scream, but Laurent, 7,400 million transfer per second is already very, very fast. And you're right, but it's simply not what is advertised on the box, and that's annoying me. So yeah, ASUS, on the next iteration of your BIOS, if you could just fix it and get us there, that would be very appreciated. Now, staying in the memory, worth mentioning, and especially important for creators out there, we got our 4 SATA 3 plugs for some slow yet cheap storage. But most importantly, we have our 4 NVMe connectors, 2 of which are CPU fed and therefore PCIe 5.0 enabled, and can therefore swap data up to a top of the industry 128 gigabit per second. Now, most of the cooling focus has been reserved for our closest NVMe to the CPU with a very tall and dense heat block, additioned to a double thermal padded solution, which makes sense since this is the only NVMe connector with an unbifurcated, dedicated 4 lanes at PCIe 5.0 standard. In short, this is where you want to put your boot drive. And just for the fun of it, I have taken the fastest, most sturdy M.2 solid state drive in existence and took it on an adventurous 1-hour stress test and never managed to see it go above 35 degrees Celsius, which is 65 degrees Celsius headroom from any chance to ever thermothrottle. Now, that is a very large room for a very small head. The 2 other NVMEs are chipset fed and both received 4 lanes at PCIe 4.0 standard for still plenty fast 64 gigabit per second individually. And cooling wise, they all get a rather large and thick thermopadded heat plate, which will do a great job at delaying thermothrottling, if any. Now, that is a very complete, respectful and fast storage solution for not only this but all similarly priced motherboard, and I have no complaint to make here. I will keep bitching a little bit on the fact that only the large PCIe 5.0 connector get a latch, a screwless solution to remove the cooling block. The other 3 NVMEs still are stuck under little screws, and ASUS is the only one persevering in this way. Obviously, I would rather to see a screwless latch here, just like we've seen on absolutely every other manufacturers in the world today. Other than that, I'm very happy. Now, export-wise, being a creator-focused board, it will not surprise us to find not 1 but 2 PCIe 5.0 enabled GPU exports here, explaining the sturdy metallic reinforcement on both of them, as well as a trigger-based slim lock mechanism to keep our heavy GPUs solidly in place. Now, best keep in mind that in a single GPU configuration, only the closest PCIe export to our CPU can dispense a future-proofed 16 PCIe 5.0 lanes. So yeah, that's where you want your graphics cards to be for optimal performances. In a dual GPU situation, our PCIe export split the PCIe 5.0 lanes in an 8x8 configuration, which has no value in a gaming setup, but does start bringing some marginal benefits in video editing, but most importantly will make a world of difference if you do like some hard data crunching, like I don't know, AI, deep learning, or dairy. The last naked export is chipset fed and can dispense some bandwidth, but nothing useful, and I think this board could have done without it. It's a bit of our money wasted, I want to say. But despite that last point, the ProArt X870E-CREATOR brings exactly what you would expect out of a good quality creation-minded motherboard, meaning dual GPU support and a bunch of bandwidth. But no, shame on me, because who am I to try to fool you? Because any Syrian chicken farmer will know that there are much more PCIe 5.0 lanes promised here than available on the Ryzen processor. So this is a time for my highly anticipated PCIe bifurcation bit. If you
PCIe bifurcation.
If you use the PCIe 5.0 enabled connector, well, you got to cut in half the second GPU export available lanes from 8 to 4. And if you use this PCIe 4.0 enabled M.2 connector, well, our naked and totally useless slot, which was my college nickname, is null and voided. And that's fine by me. ASUS really did an effort to prioritize and preserve the most important components in this motherboard, namely a fully operational dual GPU export and a dedicated PCIe 5.0 NVMe, and for that I'm happy plenty. Now comes one of my favorite part of this review, the back I/O. We got plenty of high-speed USBs, 10, 20 and 40 gigabit per second. You have it all, and in mass, because yeah, 170 gigabit per second is in mass. And add to that 25 gigabit worth of front panel connector, and we are in the gold. I need to note that our front panel Type-C can dispense up to 30 watts worth of recharging juice, which is a big upgrade from the usual 15 watts. We also have an unusual high amount of display outputs for integrated graphics, just in case you wanted to start video editing based on your processor integrated graphics. Now, connectivity-wise, the ProArt really does bring some serious premium, starting with our usual 2.5 gigabit LAN for day-to-day LANing, but most importantly, we have that beautiful, gorgeous, NAS-friendly 10 gigabit LAN plug, and that deserves some face time with me, because that feature alone is what takes away this board from the gaming community and placing it seriously and firmly into the content creation one. Because yeah, if you have a NAS and you want to pull 4K files all the time, 2.5 gigabit won't cut it. Even 5 will be slow. 10 gigabit is what you want to have on your board, and here it does. Big LAN kudos to ASUS for this. Add to that a low latency 6 gigabit per second Wi-Fi 7, and we got about the best connectivity solution you can hope from any motherboard on the market today. Now finally, our audio solution orbits around a very good and updated ALC 1220p, cleansed by a modest yet sufficient 300 microfarads worth of capacitors, and a good but not exceptional integrated audio solution. And as a content creator, I would strongly suggest that you couple this motherboard with an additional external audio card. Just my 2 cents. Now, but overall, the back I/O seriously ups the X870E-CREATOR value and surprises us with some rare and premium creator-friendly features, such as the 10 gigabit LAN I noticed earlier, and a more than generous menu of USBs. I mean, we are at 200 gigabit worth of bandwidth here. Very few boards can do that. Now, cooling-wise, well, the board capitalizes on a very sturdy 8 PWM fan connectors to keep that air flowing, including a connector which will manage your all-in-one water cooling situation. And let's not forget our little thermal connector in the case you want to monitor the inside thermals of your pleasure box. Finally, troubleshooting-wise, well, we have our vague yet crucial easy debugger, which since the ASUS infamous Max X870 motherboard, I will never take for granted again. In addition, we do have our clear CMOS, our flashback buttons for some CPU-less BIOS update, kind of crucial in my view. We don't have a QA or code here, and which for a bandwidth-driven, creator-minded board is kind of a faux pas. which means misstep in English. But it's not an absolute deal breaker in the sense that we have, you know, add-ons and options which will remedy to that problem. Thanks to the gorgeous 2K OLED screen the 360 panorama brings, we get to have a bunch of additional monitoring data such as CPU or GPU thermals, CPU frequency, etc, etc. And that adds heavily on both the troubleshooting and the monitoring aspect of not only this motherboard, but all motherboards. Now, the ProArt X870E-CREATOR Wi-Fi will cost you about, well, $500 before taxes in the US, or quite a bit cheaper in Europe, at 435 euros including tax. And it's not a cheap board, I get this, but my god, is it worth it. Let me put in simple terms what the ProArt X870E-CREATOR delivers. The entire motherboard, in every single of its aspects, has been developed with a sense of simplicity, quiet engineering, not afraid to tame down some specs in order to preserve an absolute sense of stability, hence the 5-year warranty thingy instead of the usual 3. It puts its tough sibling to shame. 2, the computing performances, because on one hand, the VRM, the motherboard, can stably extract any kind of potential out of your processor, and most importantly, I want to say, it does propose a dual GPU support, which I don't care how niche your computing needs are, this motherboard will meet them. And I could stop here and be happy, and you'd be happy too, but being the kind of guy who spends at least 5 hours of video editing a day for you, I could not help but be absolutely ecstatic to see that this motherboard comes with not 1, not 2, but 3 fully paid months of Adobe Creative Cloud. And suddenly, as a content creator using Adobe since, I don't know, 1995, you start to look at this $500 price tag in an all new light. Because this motherboard, when you buy it, is not only the best at content creating, but it will subsidize $200 worth of its money on your, creating nonsense. So yeah, very plainly, if you are a content creator, again, or a 3D renderer, again, or just a dead man in a coffin who used to appreciate sunlight, there is no other board, brand, and product your money wants, needs, and begs you to be.